Our next speaker, ladies and gentlemen, is Des Walsh, former Australian Public Service and New South Wales public servant. His topic of presentation today is why parliamentarians and public sector managers need to participate actively in social media, and in brackets, briefing papers and slideshows won't cut it. Over to you, Des.
This is very exciting to be here today, and I agree with Steve. I agree with Steve on a lot of things, but that this culture change is really important at a national level and for the future of our nation. So I see today as a nation-building thing. For a political junkie like myself, being here in Canberra today is very exciting. Just even imagining what's going on. Hard to concentrate. It's interesting that talking about Twittering and so on, a conference that Steve Collins and I were at earlier in the year, there's one speaker got up, and this was on Enterprise 2.0, one speaker got up and he complained about all these people Twittering. He wanted us to pay attention to him. We were paying attention, we were just sharing it with the world. And of course, as soon as he said, look at me and stop doing that, everybody went, so that message went around the world. And that's one of the things that is kind of scary, that I can get up here and know that there are people in the USA, in the UK, around Australia, who are tuning in on this. So, and they'll pick up. If one of you says, don't be too unkind, if somebody says something unkind, it's going to be there. And I've got to deal with that. So I'm okay with that. Some people aren't. And I want to talk about why parliamentarians and public sector managers need to participate in social media. And because I don't have because my career in the public service is way behind me, I can say what I like. Whereas some people might have had some challenge saying this. A great respect for politicians, believe it or not, parliamentarians. My father was a parliamentarian, and they contribute an irreplaceable gift to our community. And I have great respect and sympathy for people who rise to the higher echelons of the public service, because they don't do it easily, usually. So when I'm challenging with respect. But I don't believe, as I said in the kind of slightly throwaway tag, I don't believe this is something you can get by getting briefings on it. I don't think it's something you can... one of the things that was interesting last night was I was checking the profile of some people online. If you take Lindsay Tanner, for instance, Minister Tanner, who I believe is speaking here today, you can check out him on Facebook. He's got his Facebook site. There are other people in senior ranks of the Australian Public Service who may, I don't know whether it's occurred to them to have a page on LinkedIn or on Facebook or something, or if they've chosen not to because they don't want to have something up there, but they're there anyway. If you go to zoominfo.com, you'll find interesting stuff about some very senior people that maybe isn't what they want highlighted for themselves. So this isn't a game you can opt out of anymore. One of the things I'd like to do is today is to show... oh, I've got somebody else's slideshow here. What happened? Oh, no, I haven't. I've got the general one. Where's mine?
Yeah, you've got to go forward.
Okay, so that we know that. Got that. There's already been mention made of Twitter and Iran. And one of the things I want to do today is to say, by being active participants in social media, not just observers, and certainly, hopefully, not blockers, parliamentarians and senior managers and junior managers, for that matter, in the public service can better understand what's going on, be better able to lead, better able to communicate. It was fascinating to me earlier in the week, last week, on Monday night, I thought, what's going on in Iran? So I went to ABC, abc.net.au, okay? And there it was, March has been cancelled. On Twitter, March is on. It's so immediate. And if you're not sort of involved, you're going to miss so much and you're going to be slow catching up. If you rely on mainstream media solely now, there are things that you're not going to get the full story on. And the State Department, earlier in the week, Twitter was about to go down for service or upgrading or something, and tweeters all around the world said, no, you can't let those people down who are protesting in Iran. And the State Department, with all its vast resources, said, please keep Twitter up because there's stuff coming in here that we can't get from anywhere else. So that's pretty powerful, I think. You know, a year ago, April 2008, there were something like 1.7 million people on Twitter. I may be wrong, but it's now at least 10 times that, and probably tripled again. It can get very complicated. This is a wonderful thing. You can look this up, theconversationprism.com. Brian Solis, who's a PR guy in the USA, and another guy named Jess, who's actually, I think, from Australia, have put this together. And this is a kind of all the different social media platforms and tools and so on. So people look at this sometimes and they say, I can't cope. I've got, you know, briefing papers to do for the minister. I've got a committee meeting this morning. I can't get into this stuff. I'll just get swamped. But it is possible, and I'll come to that shortly, to make that task manageable. It can be very challenging. It can be quite scary to face up to this horde of people who sometimes seem very threatening to people who have been used to controlling the conversation, and they see all these people, the social media enthusiasts and the citizen activists coming at them, and they say, how can we stop this overwhelming us? The US Army tried to stop it. The US Army had restricted access to social networking sites on its bases, and recently issued an order that bases within the USA had to open access to specific social networking sites, because there was a conflict between what was happening. Senior Army and military officers were organising campaigns to promote the idea of life in the Army being really good and a great contribution to the nation, and base command or people in charge of bases saying, we can't let the troops look at this stuff that the Army was actually producing. So the order came down, just get in line, you know, get this consistency. It wasn't an open slather. They didn't, and you can read the order, it's online. They didn't say all social networking sites, they specifically excluded a number of them. But what they were saying was, we can't stop this, we don't actually want to stop it, we want to make it possible. So, you know, how do you manage it? Well, the Public Service Commission has put out the document that Steve referred to, which was August last year, and agencies have been invited to develop their own guidelines and comment and so forth. I don't know how much activity. I gathered from Steve there hasn't been a lot. If you read those guidelines, I find them, you know, having been a public servant, I understand some of the language. I understand that there's controls, there's codes of conduct, there's values, and it all has to be aligned and so on. But it didn't excite me, really. I didn't say, wow, I'd like to get into this. But there are codes of conduct for social media put out by some corporate managers in the enterprise field which are more encouraging, more enthusiastic, if you like, about participation. So there's a lot of, there's Laurel Papworth in Sydney, she's produced a list of 40 codes of conduct, and I think James Dello has a link to those on his site. So there's lots of examples you can use that not every code of conduct has to look exactly the same, and some can be actually quite encouraging. Conscious of the time. You know, the point was made earlier, it's not about tools, it's about the conversation. And this slide is just a local politician in the USA, and he's running for a school board, and he's having a conversation, he's having these coffee conversations. He also has a blog, and that kind of, for me, is, his name's Mark Brady, and he's in University City, Missouri, and if you want to look him up. And so he's having the conversation online and offline, and that's the kind of model for me of how it's going to work. I would love to start getting some communications online from my local member, not just the dead tree stuff in the mail that I tend not to read, actually, with taxpayers paying for. You could get a lot more value, I suspect, if you, for the parliamentarians' communication with their electorate, if there was more use of social media. Now, Sir Humphrey Appleby in Yes Minister came up with an answer. If it's job's worth doing, it's worth delegating, and that's the way a lot of corporate heavies deal with social media, and I suspect it's the way a lot of parliamentarians and a lot of managers deal with it. Find someone to do this, and often they say the IT people can handle this, or someone junior on the staff, because they're young so they'll understand it, they can handle it. So there's not involved, and what I'm saying is get involved, and if you don't get it, if you do delegate, then delegate actively, not at arm's length and not in a disinterested way. The other thing is, and Minister Tanner's not here. I was hoping that he'd like the picture here because it's Essendon. Then again, another politician who's recently resigned, also an Essendon supporter. The whole point is of this rather apparently frivolous slide is, if you play a game, I think it's a sort of prima facie that you're going to know more about it, aren't you? You're going to know more about the rules, how it works. I played Australian rules once, very badly, but I can actually watch the game now more intelligently and talk about it more intelligently than if I'd never wandered around in the back pocket, trying to be kept out of the way. You know, there's just something you learn about social media by doing it, by having a blog. You can even have a private blog if you're really nervous about having it public. There's something you learn by being a participant on Twitter. There's something you learn by having a Facebook page and dealing with some of the complications of the silly things that come onto that, and learning how to manage the conversation. Going back to the blog smart thing, you know, Microsoft said we're going to encourage everybody. We don't want to be seen as just this monolith. We're going to encourage everybody to blog. So just as Frank Arrigo, the wonderful Australian Microsoft blogger, now in Seattle, says, don't put something on your blog you don't want to see on the Sydney Morning Herald tomorrow morning. And there's really no need for overwhelm. You know, you can just start with a few things. I mean, how many people here have got a blog? Okay, I'm preaching to the choir. How many people have got a Facebook page? Yeah. How many people have got a Twitter page? Okay. So I belong to an organisation called Social Media Club, and we have a motto which is, if you get it, share it. So I'm going to encourage people who do get it to share that, to share the idea with people, not that this is something kind of that you have to be in the inner circle to understand, but that it's actually easy to get started. And to help people, you know, with a LinkedIn profile, which can only, if it's done intelligently, can only help people's careers and communication, to have a Facebook page, to have a Twitter account. And in the middle there, I don't know if it's showing up, it's WordPress. I'm not promoting WordPress, I'm just saying have a blog of some kind, just get used to the process of sharing your ideas. And if nothing else, have an RSS feed so you're finding out what other people are saying. People say, I can't keep up with all these blogs. They say, have you heard of RSS? Have you heard of syndication? They say, what's that? I say, that's a way for you to have your online daily newspaper. I mean, try and explain this if you're communicating with people who you think it would be good for them to get involved. Try and use simple explanations like that. So, 2 minutes. Any questions? I really would like to think that at least I've helped to challenge. Yes, James. Yeah. Yeah. Sure. Great questions. I mean, you know, I think that one of the things that the solution is in the participation, James. I think if you get involved, you start to have conversations with other people who've been through all those questions themselves. And you say, I'm stuck. I don't know which blogging platform to use. I don't know, you know, what to do with Facebook. And there'll be people all around the world, literally all around the world, who'll come in, dive in to help you, either with private messages or public ones. Yes? Great. Yes. Yes. Somebody said Twitter is a what did they say? It's a river, not a lake. You know, you can switch off.
I've got a question for you.
Okay.
What about the idea of places where people can go and meet and learn about how to Twitter with confidence and how to blog with confidence? Do you know of that happening anywhere? It
is happening. I mean, Steve Collins has started the Social Media Club here in Canberra, which is a good way of people to you know, get together with people. And the whole idea is not to have a little cosy little group that just keeps this stuff to itself, but for people who don't know anything to come along and learn from others. There are various online groups. I mean, if you've got a particular just about any interest is covered by some Google group or a Yahoo group. And so that on the online world you can find a lot of people who can share ideas.
One more question, Tom.
And by the way, there are social media clubs and lots of other. There are people in Melbourne who meet for coffee. There are people in Sydney. And Steve, a lot of people here can tell you how you can link up with those. Brisbane, Gold Coast. Tom?
So how much of this is about doing things we've done before but using new technology, and how much of it is about doing something differently, fundamentally differently, and how will the public service go from that?
I think, yes, it is partly about doing things that we've done before but doing them differently. My father used to stand on a street corner with a loud hailer thing and talk to people who'd stop and listen, and people would answer back and heckle and all of that sort of stuff. And now we've got social media, which are different ways for people to communicate with their elected officials and vice versa. But yes, there are things that are different about it, and there are new skills to be learned. And you know, I was asked at a conference at a big a corporate, well, it was AMP in Sydney a couple of years ago. One of the people who was baby boomer, and you know, I can talk very confidently to baby boomers because none of them can tell me they're too old to learn this. He said, "What's going to happen to those of us who don't learn this stuff?" And I said, "Well, sorry, but you're going to become irrelevant." You know, Gary Vaynerchuk, a very successful man in the United States, says it very succinctly. In the corporate context, some will get it and they'll do well, and others won't, and they'll fail. And I believe that's true. Thank you.
Thanks.